So I think we're at the new cycle point. The logarithmic chart, we got to the 2 standard deviations oversold. Everybody knows the on-chain metrics. We've got the perfect setup. Is it today? Is the low in? I would give it an 80% probability, but there's a 20% chance it's not. So I'm very focused right now on watching the price structure. And the final thing to give you is the big one for me is ETH breaking about the 2000 level. That would give us an inverted head and shoulders low. And also there's a downtrend from the high, and it would have then broken a wedge pattern to the upside, and that would be the start of the run to new highs whenever that occurs. The low potentially is in, because what will be happening in 12 months' time? In 12 months' time, we will have seen a recession and we will likely be coming out of it. Whether we're fully out of it or not, doesn't matter. A recession at some point in the future means that the Federal Reserve will stop hiking and will stop shrinking the balance sheet. And they will probably go towards cutting. In the future, in 12 months' time, the probability of inflation being, at 8% is extremely low because of the year-on-year computational differences and the fact that oil, copper, freight rates, everything has come down massively. So I'm thinking that there is a probability that inflation goes negative within 18 months. So if we look out 12 months, the recession is behind us, rates are lower, and inflation is low. Okay, so that is a very good outcome for risk assets and crypto. Crypto bottomed in June. We had the retest. Bitcoin had a retest only 2 days ago, and I think it was the retest. So my DMARC indicators, which I use mainly for my technical analysis, gave me that signal. ETH had a much stronger signal in June, and I started finding as much money as I could under the sofa anywhere to start investing, adding to my positions. I never sold anything. So I'm thinking the markets are forward looking. I think the sentiment is extremely bearish, and we're going into a potential change in the macro. Does it happen this month, next month? Don't really care. Then we've got the ETH merge, which we all know about. I don't think it brings fireworks. Maybe it does. Maybe there's a big sell-off after it, big sell-off beforehand. I don't really know. And again, I don't really care. What I do know is that post-merge, a few things happen. There are no miners to sell every day. That's about 6 billion that disappears from selling each month. Okay, so that's a difference. Then we've got the reduction in supply, but that's really driven by the increase in network activity. So we need to kind of see the network go up a lot for that to really kick in. It become deflationary, but it's less inflationary. So there's less ETH around, but then we've got this magic. The magic is you've just introduced yield into the ETH ecosystem in a secure way. So therefore, because it's a protocol level, so therefore this is going to attract new people into the ecosystem who want to get ETH for yield. So you've got a demand shock, also the lack of the ESG restrictions that people have with Bitcoin, falsely so, but I understand that that's the mandate people have got. So you've got people who are frustrated who wanted to invest, couldn't because of ESG and Bitcoin. The ETH merge, they're waiting for it to happen. ETH now has a yield. A lot of institutions don't own gold because it doesn't have a yield. So you've got this technology asset that represents a big, exciting future with a yield, with a limited supply. So that has a macro that's changing. That to me suggests the next 12 months probably very, very good for digital assets. So that's at the basic level. And then I'm trying to think through, okay, in a new world, ETH is this very important asset. It's still going to have problems. It's still going to be expensive, and it's still going to be slow. As adoption keeps building, a lot of adoption spills outside of the ETH into the Solana, Avalanche, and a bunch of other protocols as well. So I think we're going to see ETH lead the charge. And then we'll see this tail of stuff starting to come as we start a new bull market. And generally things work that way. So I think a lot of these layer ones this time around will be like ETH in the last cycle. They'll end up becoming very large dominant change. Which ones? Yeah. Don't really know. My bet's really on Solana, but it could be any of these, and I'm kind of indifferent right now. Solana's, as I said, I got more allocated towards that than I have to some of the others, but I'm watching them and waiting to see. I've had also technically a perfect monthly, daily, weekly DMARC setup in the Solana ETH cross. Now, I'm not yet ready to make the bet that I would switch my ETH into Solana, but I have some. But I'm observing that to say, let's see if that plays out, because that will be a narrative that people don't really expect. And I'm not saying that Solana becomes bigger than ETH or anything of that sort. I'm just saying, could it outperform in this cycle? So I think we're at the new cycle point. The logarithmic chart, we got to the 2 standard deviations deviations oversold. Everybody knows the on-chain metrics. We're like, we've got the perfect setup. Is it today? Is the low in? I would give it an 80% probability, but there's a 20% chance it's not. So I'm very focused right now on watching the price structure. And the final thing to give you is the big one for me is ETH breaking about the 2000 level. That would give us an inverted head and shoulders low. And also there's a downtrend from the high, and it would have then broken a wedge pattern to the upside. And that would be the start of the run to new highs whenever that occurs. In the last 18 months, I've realized that it's bigger than just a financial system. It's in fact the entire system of value, transfer, storage, and ownership in the new digital world. It is probably one of the biggest things I've ever heard of or seen, and it is an incredibly exciting moment in time to be part of it. And it's like learning about the discovery of oil when the Rockefellers and all of these guys started figuring out that the oil was going to make the world go round. Had you been an investor and a participant and understood what it could do and what businesses you could build across the network of oil or the mobile phone or the internet, the fortunes that were made, the changes that happened were so staggering. And this is happening faster, and at the very center of it is a system of money and value, which means that in itself it is going to accrue value faster than anything else, because that's what it's actually doing, is taking value from old places and putting it into a new place. So the opportunity set is so big, and it is that perfect nexus of macro and crypto, because the macro is so fucked, which we've known for so long. The massive debt, the bad demographics, the polarization of the world again, the deglobalization, the globalization, all the mess that caused. All of that is going on in macro land, which is pretty miserable. And here's the solution in front of our eyes. I mean, what a time to be alive. And that's why it's so important. Everybody needs to understand this stuff. Whether you're trading this stuff, building businesses, or you're just observing it, it is incredibly, incredibly important. First order thinking is recession bad. The actual thinking is, if there were to be a recession for 3 years, what are the central banks doing, right? Because that's unemployment rising for 3 years and inflation falling for 3 years. What would the central banks be doing? They would be trying to stimulate as much as possible, because we have not had a 4-year recession in, well, as long as, not even the 30s, I don't think it was that long. So, but let's assume it's the 1930s again. That is incredibly positive crypto, because there's a massive debasement of currency having to happen to try and protect the world falling apart because of the debt burden. So again, it's not about are we in recession, it is what is the outcome as growth slows, what happens to liquidity on a forward-looking basis.